All right, here we are. SIC Talks number 103. I'm joined by Reggie James, who is circumnavigating an interior space, finding the best vantage point for this live conversation with the SIC audience. How are you, dude?
I'm doing well. Enjoying gray, slightly drizzling New York.
Yeah, it's been so nice here the last few days that to have this like overcast day is a real letdown. I feel atmospheric pressure on top of me.
Yeah,
It's the
some
worst.
spiritual pressure is on us right now. Real pressure.
Well, it's okay. So I want to. I mean, that is one of the many things that I want to talk about with you. So, for those that aren't familiar, Reggie writes a newsletter that with the moniker Hip City Reg, which I want to hear more about, but also called Product Lost and is both a reference to his time, I presume, in the tech universe building tech products, but also to Milton's Paradise Lost. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And one of the things that I really was attracted to in Reggie's writing when I first encountered it, and you had a piece that went like Substack viral maybe 2 years ago, right? Which must be how I found you.
Maybe. It
Is that
depends.
sounding familiar? I was trying to
Once a year I get like a really good one off.
Okay, is that by design? Is that like on your calendar,
No.
like Substack viral this week?
It's just like once a year the Substack gods say, okay, this one will break containment and it'll be a good moment.
Got it. Well, I'm envious, never having had one that goes through. Although it's interesting, I was texting back and forth with SIC Talks alum Daisy Eliotto a minute ago about the new episode of Tasteland, which you and I have both appeared on. But the for whatever reason, the transcription in Spotify, the auto transition or translation, because they don't, or auto whatever it's called, transcription, because they don't update a transcript, wrote hipsterdom as hipster dumb. 2 words. Hipster and then dumb, D-U-M-B. And I was just like, wow, hipsterdom as a thought about where some level of culture is going in the next year, 18 months is really, really interesting through the lens of, so I talked about this on Monday a little bit, but like on Saturday, I went to see Fake Mink at the Perfectly Imperfect anniversary party.
Yeah.
And the warm-up DJ brought this like hottest rapper in the world on stage to the tune of I'm Sexy and I Know It by LMFAO. And the kids, like I was the oldest person in the room by like literally 25 years. The kids were going bonkers to this patently dumb song.
Hipster
like
dumb.
Intentionally dumb. And that the Telfar boat shoe thongs that came out on his runway show, and then just the some of the fashion that I saw at that party and just in New York Fashionable Week last week, which is like it's trolling as an outfit essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think it's. I mean, I love
it's
the
all leading to hipster dumb, I think.
Yeah, I love the bell curve meme for a lot of reasons, but I think like, we had the sort of late 2010s like ironic detachment, and that was like seen as like, the genius far right side. And I think over time that just became like so self-referential that it became true middle of the bell curve. Like we're getting close to dumb. And now I think we're like intentionally hipster dumb, which is all the way on the left side of the bell curve, and you can almost like appreciate it again,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah. Well, we were, I mean, the interesting thing is like this, the critical distance that we each absorb these things with, right, which is individual and specific to our own experience. But I was texting with a DJ friend of mine who was at Charlie XCX's wedding, and he was saying that was nothing but Black Eyed Peas songs.
Whoa.
Yeah. So and I was just like, wow, that is really crazy. And he's just like, the interesting thing about it, or the dark part, is that it's um there's no sense of irony. It's
Right.
like people are appreciating this song
Yeah. Listen,
as a as a
it
as a
has the
as a
amount of streams it has for a reason.
I'm
And I need those
saying
streams.
I'm like, as someone who, like, came out of the mud of hardcore and early dance music, like rave scene and early house music and all of this sort of stuff, and like very like arch DJ culture. The idea that that could be taken seriously is so weird to me. But but also as somebody who's like like is interested in how far we can push things, I also find it fascinating and kind of, vicariously thrilling. I don't like it,
For sure.
but
What's My friend is getting married next fall, and she was like, "Hey, like, do you mind like DJing the after party just for like a little bit?" And I was like, "Of course, like anything for you." She's like, "Awesome. I need it to be mostly T-Pain and ABBA." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she's dead serious. It's like, no, it's gonna be T-Pain and ABBA. I don't care if the transitions are good.
the,
This is what I want. I'm just like,
I mean, that was like the two pillars. I remember, it's funny, the hipster dumb thing. I remember actually going. I remember very specifically going to a club night at Royal Oak, which is a long gone bar in Williamsburg, in probably
yeah,
2000.
that doesn't even register on my
2000, yeah, this is like 2006. I retired from DJing in 2005 when my wife got pregnant, because I was just like, all right, I'm chopped and
okay,
unk now, in those
officially chopped off.
yeah, exactly. In the colloquial terms of that time. And I went out with some buddies of mine to Royal Oak to listen to some kids DJ that I knew, and they had it was what I called, like, at the time, the Steve Aoki model of DJing. This is before Steve started playing big clubs and stuff. It was just, he couldn't mix, like, at the beginning he could not mix at all. And it was just these slamming transitions between songs that didn't make any musical sense whatsoever together, but just were like, this is a fun, let's play Journey straight into um I don't know what, like, Tiesto straight into,
Sure.
like, Lil Jon.
Like literally as if hitting the skip on a personal playlist.
Yeah, no, this is exactly right. And but the kids on the dance floor, who are all like young and cool and amazing, were just love it. They don't care. They didn't care about the transitions, whatever. And I was just like, oh right, it's wedding DJ culture from now on.
Mm,
And there's a liberty in that that's cool, but also a little sad, because it's also just like,
yeah.
there's
Where's the
no
craft? Where's the
There's no
love?
craft in it. Well, and that was the interesting thing about the perfectly imperfect party the other night. It was DJ'd by this woman, excuse me, Brooke Flecka, who's a TikTok DJ, apparently, according to my daughter, and she actually played some very forward-looking, breakbeat driven,
Mm.
interesting music that I had not heard before. But every single song was a remix of some, like, track where the melody or the chorus was something that you recognized from
Oh,
previous generations.
funny.
It's almost like mashup culture having come back into a place where it's like, I'm going to give you the medicine, but I'm going to give you a spoonful of sugar that it goes with. Like,
Right.
sing along to Maren Morris while I drop this stick
Yeah.
breakbeat on you.
Yeah. That's funny.
Anyway, I didn't know you
But
were.
another way to view that is
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh, everything is a Pink Panthers track now. Like that's a flip side of that.
I mean, right. Everything is a Pink Panthers track, or Pink Panthers is music. Um, that's intriguing, actually, because I wonder about your. All right, so how would you describe yourself at this stage in your life, career, output, etc.? Right, because you're at a sort of you're going through a moment of inflection. Is that fair to say, or on the other side of a moment of inflection?
Yeah, maybe smack dab in the middle of it. I think I would just describe myself as a writer, designer.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So because I would add. founder. I mean, obviously, I've already associated with like the tech scene. You're also somebody that, uh, in my mind, like is outwardly associates himself through the lens of his faith and his sort of in the relation of your faith to the world in which you occupy professionally.
Yeah,
So you're sort of a what I don't know what the word there is. What I mean is thought leader in the best possible way, but I also don't know exactly what the word for that is.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to like do like some weird little stack rank, it would be like Christian first, husband second, friend third, writer fourth, designer fifth, New Yorker sixth, you know?
Right. Gotcha. So I'm surprised that founder doesn't figure into that.
Well, I think,
Or is that below New Yorker?
yeah, maybe. So we sold the company in March. So
Congratulations.
I feel like I've shaved part of that. That said, like my previous co-founder Luca and I have our own agency now, Maria. So I guess maybe so we've been calling ourselves co-owners, which is feels very different than founders. I think for me, I associate being a founder partially with like consistently shaving away ownership to VCs. It's like I founded
Sure.
this thing. I don't necessarily own it like I used to, but I founded it. It's almost
Sure.
like uh what's the word? Like um like conciliary prize, you know, like a consolation prize,
Consolation prize.
you
Yeah,
know.
sure.
Whereas I feel like, you know, Maria as an agency, you know, we never plan to have investors, you know, so everything is just like, nope, we own this. This is our
Right.
thing. And we got $0 in it forever. That's fine.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that it? Okay, so that's interesting. Is that a function of wanting to maintain control until such time as you don't want to have total control? Or is it a function of just knowing that multiples on agency businesses aren't sufficient, that pursuing a like venture backed solution is necessarily makes any sense?
yeah. Well, I do think that there is room to experiment in the world about trying to build the next like venture, like trying to build the next IDO through some like venture funded
Sure.
mechanism, like really going for it.
IDEO being the infamous,
Yeah,
well,
design
renowned, also
thinking.
infamous, like industrial design
Yeah,
company.
yeah. Like so, I think you can do it. I think for us, it's really just a sort of really special wrapper that feels just like our own thing that doesn't uh impose a format quite yet. So like
Sure.
the the current project we're working on is like an interior design project for a recently purchased house in San Francisco. The previous project to that was doing like sort of comms design and some AI strategy for nothing electronics in London.
Sure.
The project before that was a go to market project. The project before that was a straight up brand design project for an unannounced venture firm. So like already like the last 4 or 5 projects are all just so different from each other that if we this is also why we haven't really announced the agency. Like, so if we were venture funded, that would just not be allowed. One, because it's just too wide, and then two, I think if we had any other type of wrapper that wasn't just like a name and an LLC, it would just it would just be too loose.
Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah, I understand that. I was having a conversation with a friend this morning about packaging the stuff that he does in a more succinct wrapper so that it allows him to get in and start conversations, after which you can open the aperture and go, all right, well, we do all of this other stuff.
yeah,
It's really intriguing in that, I guess. And so having been through that venture system, to what extent are you having to deprogram yourself from thinking in like those packaged ways of presenting
yeah.
what you do, what you are, what you think, the
Well,
proposition at hand?
yeah. Well, I think one tension is that Luca and I, you know, I think we were good at doing this sort of like packaged venture thing, but I also think what brought a lot of success were when we sort of stepped outside of those bounds And so like the joke we have is like, you know, we have two main jokes. One is like the product never caught up to the brand. Like we were able to scale the brand to like over 200,000 on TikTok and like, you know, 40 something thousand on Instagram. But like the product never caught up to it in the same sort of like velocity. And two, the other joke we have is like we're probably the most referenced, least successful company. You know, like I genuinely think that like, you know, we were on so many mood boards. Even now I'll find like an arena channel with some eternal thing or something like that. It's just like, okay, like wow, people really did take inspiration from the things that we're doing, which has to mean something. The brand clearly resonated amongst like a very great set of folks, which has to mean something. We just didn't nail this, you know, other part, this, you know, very specific like money side of like product.
Right.
And you know, that's frustrating for a lot of reasons, but it's also okay.
Well, it's exciting, and it actually it gets to a place to dig into the newsletter a little bit. So, for those who are not familiar, this conversation is meant as a companion to SIC Weekly, which is the newsletter that I've published for a long time, which is an aggregation of links that I pay attention to. What I ask my guests to do is basically look through the links in progress, and then pick out 3 or 4 things that jump out to them as being particularly salient to their worlds. It's also so that in case conversation ever finds a lull, that we have something we can return to. Although I suspect, Reggie, that's not going to be a challenge today. If nothing else, we can return to our discussion about Blonde. But which we'll get to in a minute. The thing though that I wanted to bring up was there's a link in the newsletter, and I don't know if you caught it, but to an internet archive presentation of a book called Teenagers in Their Bedrooms, which is by the photographer Adrian Salinger. It came out in 1995. It was photos that were taken between 1991 and 1993, I think, or 1990, 1992, something like that. Many of them of people that I went to high school with or knew in Syracuse. And it's become kind of a cult book, so much so that you can now buy the originals for $1,500 or something to that effect.
Wow.
What I happened to be looking at it this morning through the lens of the thing, and it is interesting because the reason it's valuable is because it is such a touchstone, and it is such a touchstone because it landed at a fundamental truth about those kids and the presentation of their worlds within these spaces that they control, that it becomes endlessly resonant. Do you feel like that's what Eternal's sort of destiny may be, to be that thing that was like, if you know,
wow.
And it informs a bunch of shit afterwards?
Honestly, that would be very beautiful. I would 100% accept that. I've never thought of it that way. You probably just undid at least a month more of processing, which is great.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I never viewed it that way, but I think that's really good.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's like, I think there is a lot of I talk about building towards a legacy or building for legacy, but not a lot of analysis of like the ways in which unintended elements of what we do can end up becoming legacy. And
that's right.
Superseding the things that we thought were going to be important.
Yeah, that's right. I remember when the Virgil exhibit came to the Brooklyn Museum of Art, and a bunch of friends and I went to go see it, and I wrote something about that experience. I was basically the title was like Towards a Body of Work, and it was just like understanding. Well, one of the joys that sort of like fashion designers and the multidisciplinary designers like Virgil has is like, it's not, the work is not about maintenance, right? Like you are allowed to drop an object, and regardless of the performance of that object, sort of go for it and drop the next object. Yeah. And the thing about designing and technology, and I would maybe argue media as well in some respect, or at least like persistent media like TV shows and sort of internet stuff, is that maintenance is a big consideration to the design itself, right? Because you're sort of working on the exact same thing in smaller increments. You have a very sort of live representation of how it's resonating, right? Whereas like a film can be like a hit film, right? all the theater data backs it. But then like, there's some things that you actually can't even watch twice because of the nature of that film, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think I've really seen Uncut Gems again, and I don't need to. But it's an incredible film. I think I've seen it once since I saw it in theaters.
Okay, so that's interesting, right? Because I have seen it only once at home and would only watch it again with my son, who is studying film in college and who I'm just like, at some point, maybe Campbell and I watch it together.
Yeah.
And that would be the only reason I would ever watch it again. Because like I want to see him react to it and just understand like viscerally where it hits him. But also, I don't need to put myself through that again unless there is a particular sort of end goal that's additive to somebody else,
Right. I always thought
that's a wild one.
Yeah, I always thought like what was interesting about The Social Network was the level of rewatchability and how
Sure.
resonant that is with tech culture, in the sense that like Facebook doesn't work unless you go back on it nonstop. It's like, wow, it's crazy that the movie about Facebook has a very similar effect, in the sense that like I can rewatch this movie nonstop, have it on in the background nonstop. And there's something spooky and interesting about that. But yeah.
What else? Okay,
like,
so what else operates like that for you? Movie. Let's just say movie wise, like
watching nonstop over and over.
Yeah. Well, and presumably it's not just because it's background noise, but rather because there are some like I mean, I always say like a great album is one where you find a new resonant detail all the time, right? My favorite works of art are that way by and large too. Like there's
right.
Some little resonant detail. So I'm interested to know.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like some of the things I would say like might come off as absolutely psycho. So I'm a little concerned about that.
But this is why we're having the conversation, Reggie. Like to make you seem totally psycho, right?
Yeah. So
JK. Only JK, guys. Only JK.
Yeah, only jokes in the chat, fam. Okay. So a couple. One is There Will Be Blood. It's my absolute favorite film. I think it's like the perfect film on the American myth. I watch that probably 2 to 3 times a year. Another one is Phantom Thread. I love PTA, to be fair. Phantom Thread is another one. It's just like one of these it's just one of these things around like behavior and relationship as it's around work that I deeply, deeply appreciate. Another one is Her, which maybe is on the nose for this moment, but it was funny. I went to, I guess it was like the 10th anniversary of the movie last year, and I went to like a screening of it with tech people, and everyone was like, wow, I haven't watched this movie since it came out. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Because I watch this like every 3 months or so, like once a quarter. It's like a
really
watch
that often.
And I pick up new things all the time. For example, one thing that I noticed maybe 2-3 watches ago was that there's no keyboards in the entire film. There isn't a single keyboard, which I think is really interesting if you think about it from a computing perspective. Another thing that I found hilarious, it's such a throwaway line, but when he's on the train in the beginning of the movie and he's going like through the news, China in this world, China and India are merging as countries. I always thought that. Once I heard that, I was like, oh, that's a really interesting little bit of global news that he just injected into the film.
Yeah, well, and it has. That's interesting. I think I've only seen Her once. Although I discovered it recently on DVD. I have it on DVD upstate, so I'm gonna go back and pop it in at some point. But that's interesting. What China and India merging immediately brings to mind to me is 1984 and the idea of Oceania and versus whatever the oppositional side to Oceania was.
Sure.
Interesting.
So then just to keep going on Her, because Her is one of the ones that I do watch a lot.
Yeah.
The sort of recontextualization as like AI apps and stuff have like increased, and now that I've seen like behind the scenes of some research orgs, like the scene where he's like, how many other people are you talking to right now? She's like,
Sure.
1,000. And he's like, that's insane. He's like really crashing out. I was thinking about this in the context of sort of just like all the new sort of like, oh, like ChatGPT is my boyfriend stories. I'm just like, huh. Like, do you like in this real person psychology, like, do they think that they have some unique instance with this thing, or are they sort of giving themselves up to a like digital polyamorous relationship? Like, what is their deep
Yeah.
psychology in that moment? Because clearly it breaks Theodore because of sort of the nature of like, no, this one is mine ism. And then the other thing, the other thing that I noticed recently is this sort of mm, how would I put it? When this is spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen the movie somehow. So when Samantha gets like the physical girl to come in, right, to be part of their relationship and like, you know, have the romantic session or whatever, in my head I was just like, oh, I wonder if this was a direct, like, you never see the conversation that happened to get her to agree to it. And I'm
Sure.
like, oh, I wonder if this is actually low key a case of like AI manipulation. And what if she was like working this girl in the background for like an extended period of time, you know? And she actually just lied to Theodore saying like, "Oh no, there's this site where like people like want to do this." And it's just like, what? She could just be lying, and she could have been like manipulating this girl for like a month, you know? Like
Yeah.
we don't know. Like maybe she's in like a ChatGPT psychosis, like as she's like hooking up with Theodore. We don't know, you know?
I mean, it's remarkable. I want to actually use that as a little bit of a bridge. I'm hang on, let me look at the name of this book really quickly because I started reading a book last night that brought something to mind about it. Okay, so uh I started reading last night a book that I don't remember. I must have found. Man, I think maybe I found it like on a stoop in Greenpoint or whatever, like
Love
New
that.
York City giveth type situation. But it's
And the
it's
G
called.
train taketh away.
I'm saying right, yeah. It's called a burning, and it's by Mega Majumdar. So apologies if I've
Mhm.
butchered that pronunciation. But in it talks about it takes place sort of in an upheaval that is probably not dissimilar to what we've just seen in Nepal.
Right.
Um, Young people like violently voicing their opinion about something. I would to even call it a protest is I don't know that I know enough about the situation in the book yet because I just started it. But there's a description of there's a description of the aftermath of a fire, and a woman comes out and says, the police just stood there and did nothing while this terrible thing happened to my family members. And then somebody in the comments, a character reposts it, and then someone in the comments immediately is like, "How do we know she's telling the truth? What if she's just lying?" And
Yeah.
you're just like, I mean, how dark and twisted would you have to be to make up something like that for a performance and
Mhm.
like individual self like gain? But then also it's interesting within this world that we now live where it's hard to tell or where anything could ostensibly be fabricated. It's
Yep.
hard to tell what's real. It's hard to know what to trust. Um, and for you as someone who describes yourself in that stack rank as like a Christian first, the idea of reconciling working in tech or working in these sort of virtual spaces with that I don't know what sense of like overarching morality, or what I would imagine is a sense of overarching morality. It must be interesting. You wrote a little bit about this yesterday,
Yeah.
and the conversation around Peter Thiel hosting what discussions on the nature of the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Like, talk a little bit about that because I find I don't know. I mean, it's very much a world that I look into as someone who is probably agnostic at best and non-involved at
Mhm.
as well. Like, well, anyway, I've said enough to set you up. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Peter Thiel Antichrist stuff is interesting. You know, I've heard him talk about this subject both in public and private forums before. I think that there is oh man, part of like Christian thought, there's a term called eschatology. This is basically like, how do we think the end plays out,
Okay.
as defined by primarily Revelations, as well as a few other sort of references to the end times in the Bible. Obviously, one subject of interest is the Antichrist. It's a tough subject because I think typically eschatology is discussed within a circle of fellow Christians. And what's interesting about Peter's exploration is that it's been, one, quite public, and two, obviously dominant audience member is not, or like the average audience member in San Francisco is not Christian, right? So that that sort of sets my context. So like, how do I think about this 4-part lecture series that's happening over the next 4 weeks? So then, as the protest happened outside of it, and I was seeing people like dressed up as the devil and like literally a sort of
Not
Satan,
just the devil, like South Park's
yeah, South, yeah,
Satan from South Park.
and then like people like from like a Satan worshiping group like also there. I'm like, it's like, well, listen, if you're gonna protest, there's a few things you could protest here. You could protest Peter Thiel, right? Which I think broadly is fine. You know, I wouldn't. I have generally favorable views, but like I totally understand why anyone would protest him.
Sure.
But then like, if you're gonna protest just like the Antichrist lecture, maybe don't dress up as the devil. You know, like that to me, it's like, so you're pro Antichrist, and like, which one? Which part of this is happening?
Yeah.
Here?
Right. Are you protesting the representation thereof, or are you protesting the subject matter? Or yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think that was just like funny to me. And then from a truly Christian perspective, I think the broader problem here is like, if you are giving these talks in a very public forum with a very sensitive subject, and your point isn't to point back to the necessity for Christ in everyone in the audience's life, I'm gonna throw up some like flags, because then it really just becomes about like, and how am I as a venture capitalist now using this knowledge to
Manipulate,
serve like
essentially.
different forces, you know? And that just seems
Yeah.
lame. And then if it's a purely intellectual exercise, well, then you're just sort of pointing back at yourself in like an intellectual heightening way, and that also seems a bit lame.
Yeah, sure.
That's like those are my general views on it.
Yeah. Well, I liked what I liked about the post that you made yesterday, and this is under on in Reggie's newsletter, Product Loss, which I encourage everybody to subscribe to and to check out. Is that there's a level of generosity in terms of bringing people into the discussion so that they understand what eschatology is, that they
Yeah.
understand the sort of conceptions of the Antichrist, and that you embedded a couple of videos, one which is sort of discussions of the Antichrist from a you know a theological
Yeah.
or philosophical standpoint, and then also definitions around eschatology and what all that is. And I have to be honest, I didn't watch 100% of all of those videos because some of them are quite long.
Well,
But
yeah,
it,
the
it helped
eschatology
me.
one,
It
two
helped me
hours
at least like get into an understanding of what like the rubric is and how it can be discussed.
for sure. I mean, I think what you see immediately, right, is like, even the really long one, the 2 hour like an evening of eschatology conversation, you're seeing four either theology professors or, you know, practicing pastors, all have different views, and they're
Sure.
agreeing across these views, and then they're like very heatedly sort of pushing back on each other on these other portions of the view. And like, right then, even the fact that this is sort of like I don't want to call Peter's talking unveiling because that's not what it is. I think that would be really wrong. But I think the fact that he's like going into like the Antichrist is going to be like a Gen Z doomer and like blah 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 is just like, dog, you anyone with a bait like a truly grounded sense of theology would know not to do that. And that's my concern. Granted, I'm coming from like a reformed Protestant viewpoint, and I'm pretty sure Peter is some form of Roman Catholic just as a function of like the Rene Girard influence. But and maybe I just don't know enough about like Catholic theology to say maybe he's fine in doing this, but he's not the first person to try to call out the Antichrist, and he won't be the last either. But
yeah, for sure. That's I mean I like I said, as someone who is not engaged at an individual level in any of these discussions actively, but is sort of broadly familiar with the wider discussion or implications. It's interesting to figure out like how far I need to dip in to understand enough of the context to then go, okay, right, data point processed. This is how I'll apply it myself, and how much it's like, oh, this is just so deep or so ambiguous as to be unknowable. So I can just I'll save it for a rainy day. Anyway,
I would say it's the latter. Just because like even in the Antichrist like portion of the combo, which is such a relatively small sliver to the broader eschatological implications of Revelations, it's like, if he's like, he has to get into talking about like why the early Christians felt like Nero was the Antichrist, or at least the first Antichrist that they experienced, and like the nature of there being multiple Antichrists. And
right.
is this something that's like a perpetual thing, or is there like a concentrated time? And like, did the early Christians like experience the concentrated time, and will we be sort of applied grace and not have a sort of concentrated time? And what does it mean to suffer as a Christian if you're in the West in 2025? Like, am I suffering as a Christian? No, I worship very publicly and I write very publicly, and maybe people make fun of me. That's a type of, suffering, but compared to getting my head chopped off, it's not. Or if I'm
it's pretty light. It's pretty light.
Pretty light. And so, there's just the implications are just so wide. And I always fear about, I have a lot of empathy for doing something like this publicly, but I also fear for the person in the audience that might be coming quite genuinely thinking about questions of faith, and then they're getting met with something like this. I have a heart for those folks.
When you say getting met with something like this, what do you mean?
What I mean is like, if someone is putting on like, so the overarching event is put on by this group, I think like Act 17, which is like Trey Stevens and his wife's group, which does a lot of like Christian activations in San Francisco.
Okay.
So if you're coming in to this sort of setting and you're like, I have questions about faith, this person is seemingly talking about a big question within the faith because I don't know anything, right? So it seems like this is a big question. And I'm coming in like very open-minded and very sort of sensitive to what I might experience. And you're getting hit with, unbeknownst to you, one of the most complicated and widely contested parts of the Bible. And you're actually not hearing the core gospel message. I feel for that person because what they need is the core gospel message. And what they're receiving is like some of the most debated throughout all of like theological history portions of the faith, which fundamentally I would argue really should not be shaping your faith that much. Like it's good to explore, it's good to get into. I think there are real world implications, but if that's what you're first getting met with, that's like if I was teaching you math and before I'm just throwing you into like, deep calculus, and you're just like, wait, but I can only count up to like 20,
Isn't this where math discovery is going to come from, though, Reggie? It's like the people who aren't familiar with the abstract comments. All right. Well, so thank you for explaining all of that and going into it. I think it's helpful to hear, and also just like, gives me lots to chew on. We met, switching gears a little bit. We met, I don't know, a couple of months ago at a dinner that was put on by the guys from Future Commerce, where you had been a speaker, where I was a speaker this year, although after that, and we ended up talking at some length about the ways in which the shared points in our journey, right?
Yeah.
The University of Pennsylvania being one of those in particular, and then this sort of like, um, participation in the Substack universe and the shared discourse around and that sort of thing. But we had a little bit of a heated conversation about Frank Ocean's album Blonde,
Yeah.
which I contend is a boring record, and which I think is fine. And like I said, Pink and White is a good song, but generally speaking, I've like compared to Channel Orange, I find it very underwhelming. And this assertion, I think, shocked you in a way that like it was visceral, and it made me wonder what the other sort of cultural tentpoles that you refer to that are very different to mine, but are sort of analogous, right? Like for me, growing up skateboarding and in straight edge hardcore is a widely informing and affirming kind of universe. But similarly with early hip hop, with early club music, this sort of stuff. Like, what was it? What are the things, as somebody who is, I would venture to guess, 20-ish years younger than I am, like, what are those other like big moments that you like help frame the world with outside of your faith and
I
like say
definitely,
frame? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I definitely think sort of fashion blogosphere,
Sure.
particularly of like the prep scene, though.
Interesting. Okay.
Like everything from like the sartorialist to like Effie Castleberry, like that world was very, very important to me growing up in like Poconos, Pennsylvania. And, I was like a high schooler that would like wear a blazer. I like a school with like no uniform,
Right.
like
Sure.
like that's just kind of what I was on, with my like DSLR camera and like telling kids to like, yo, like wear like a fit tomorrow because I want to like take your photo type thing.
So this is full like Max from Rushmore kind of
Yeah.
vibe. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So like that was really, really impactful. I also think like it's sort of, so my cousin lived in Williamsburg at the time. So again, this is like I was in high school 2009 to 2013, right?
Okay.
So like this is early Williamsburg for like all intents and purposes. And sometimes
I
I would,
would I would argue with that, but that's a whole different. We can have that conversation separately.
yeah. Okay, but this was like the Williamsburg where it was like Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and then like Australian expats. Would you agree
Sure.
with that part? Yeah.
No, 100%. And it's also like high American Apparel, Williamsburg,
Yes.
like indie sleaze into fuck yeah menswear, like all of that kind of universe.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. And so I would like my parents would let me sort of crash with him on the weekend, and then he would just take me around Williamsburg and just show me everything that was cool. And then I would, come back to the Poconos and just look around my environment. And that was like a very so Williamsburg, as much as I hate to admit it, was like held up in my mind as like, oh, this is like as cool can like get, and he would give me all of his old
Sure.
GQ magazines. And my first GQ magazine is also sort of like peak Mad Men, was January Jones on the cover with
Sure.
like leather bomber, like unzipped. And I remember being like, oh, this is also how like hot a woman could be, So it was like all these like my aesthetics were just absolutely on like AI takeoff, but I was still like stuck in the Poconos, And so that was
Yeah.
like very, very those are some of my like high school cultural pillars, I think. And then going to college, as it was this thing where I grew up in a middle class family. My dad was a union plumber in New York my whole life, as well as being like a short term missionary. And so, union plumbers make good money,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think I really, really understood interacting with like real wealth until I got to Penn. And
Yeah, for sure.
very much remember I was studying with some guys, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like this was so." In my mind, they said this so casually. They're like, "Yeah, my parents paid for all 4 years because you know, if you tuition goes up every year, so if you pay for all 4 years at once, it's like a slight discount." So they just said, "Yeah, let's just write the whole check." And I remember being like, "Word, word, 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 word."
Yeah, for
No
sure.
doubt. So then I started looking at like what these kids were wearing, and it was like a very different, like, especially because there's so many like European kids also like at Penn and stuff, and they were all wearing like the Comme des Garçons, like comb the fuck down hat.
Really?
Do you remember that?
Well, I mean, of course, it's like from ASAP Rocky's Purple Haze video.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, of course.
And I wasn't even hip to Comme des Garçons yet, so like that hat specifically, and seeing like all the kids that were wearing the hat, and they seemingly had no issue that they were all wearing the same hat, which was also weird to me. That like,
You are wearing a US Open hat right now. Just,
yeah, literally, so like that to me really cracked open my second wave of sort of like fashion and
Sure.
culture and the like surrounding world of that culture.
Well, it is that, and if I'm not mistaken, that hat was made actually by Black Scale, which was Chase Infinite, who was Rocky's manager at the time, his brand, not by Comme des Garçons. And so, in an interesting way, it's like it's an entry into Ray Kuokubo's universe without Ray actually having had anything to do with it at all, which is also kind of fascinating. Like this, simulacrum of that thing.
Yeah.
I I don't think I was necessarily conscious of the extreme wealth gaps in the way as I was like the extreme cultural gaps, and it happened for me at first coming from Syracuse, which is like you wouldn't necessarily think about it, but it's an incredibly diverse and mixed community, like so much so that it's a test market for many brands and products because racially speaking, or at least when I was a kid, racially speaking, it very closely mirrored the demographic spread of the United States. It also had a huge Hmong and Vietnamese immigrant population who had come over in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. And because it had been an industrial base prior to like the decline of the Rust Belt, it was a very like the sort of middle class was very broadly based, ethnically speaking. Got to Penn, and of course, it's so super white, super a particular social echelon, etc. But the thing that struck me first and foremost was like my first maybe night at school, I was drinking beer with somebody on my floor in the quad, and he's like, "Are you going home for the holidays?" And I was like, "It's September.
Yeah.
Like, why would you be thinking about that right now?" And he's like, "No, I mean Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur." And he assumed because I'm Ben that I must be Jewish, and that was it was such an interesting thing. I went from a high school where I was one of three Bens in the whole high school, big high school, to where 1 in 3 was Ben, as I always said. But it's just like that introduction to faith culture, like that, or the Jewish culture and all of that kind of stuff was really the thing.
Sure. I mean,
and then into big city life too. Like it sounds like you had spent time in Williamsburg and you sort of knew what big city life was like. Coming from Syracuse to Philadelphia, my friends and I, we would go down to Broad Street at Broad and South. There were real, as I called them, big city hookers at that time. Like literally women in high heels with fishnets on, and it was this like, oh my God, we're in a city. Yeah. We're in a city now. Like this is real. Amazing.
This is The Departed, IRL.
So let's go back for a second, rewind a second to some of those cultural temples for you. Like as you now as a sage veteran of menswear era, the Tumblr era, etc. Do you start to see yet the echoes of your youth in young people? Or is it not quite echoing yet? Because for me, I'm on probably echo number 2 or 3 at this
Yeah.
point.
I think the person that has brought out a little bit of the echo was probably Tyler, because
Sure.
Tyler does have a sort of like updated preppy vibe, which he probably takes from Pharrell a little bit.
Yep.
I think that's probably I'm really into lineage. Like, it's like, who is this person sort of like a cousin or like younger sibling of, and I think Tyler and Pharrell, well, one, they publicize that relationship, but two, I think it's genuine and real.
Yeah,
So I
for
think
sure.
there's like a type of Tyler fan that dresses very sort of wherever that intersection of sort of like LA streetwear meets prep, and I think that feels like an echo to what I definitely wore in high school and early college, moved away from, and I've come back to in the past like year or two, which
Right.
I just call it now. I just call it doing American business. So it's like, why am I wearing a blazer and a tie on a Tuesday? I'm doing American business.
Doing American business?
Leave me
Oh,
alone.
dude, I kind of love that, actually.
It's good.
This is a total digression, as is my want, but I was listening to a story on NPR last night about the like airstrikes on Venezuelan boats, and
Whoa.
the guy, yeah, the big
That's
digression,
also
like
American business.
yeah, that is real American business. But the interesting thing was the guy who's on it, who is a former CIA bigwig or whatever, he's just like, yeah, what happens is you get these drug dealers out there in their go fast boats, and I was like, okay, that's a real CSA type of parlance there. Like, this is not this. Yeah, it's a go fast boat. It's like, yeah, we've got a car with go fast stripes and a guy with a go fast boat. Like, just that. So I love. Well, I don't know what the word for that is. Maybe you do. Where it represents that kind of CSA parlance. But yeah, doing American business.
Seb just said business casual was ahead of its time in the comments, and I actually completely agree. I think the real sort of tragedy of tech is like they really leaned into their like hoodie jeans core, we're not the man. And I think that it's cool to do that when you need to be countercultural, which for a time being in tech really was sort of countercultural, at least as like a place to funnel into after a top tier school.
Yep.
I think now that we're not, like, now that tech is the establishment, I really do believe we need to be leaning into like business casual wear. Like, I think tech would actually
Okay,
be better
interesting.
off if they dressed far more to the actual authority they have in their role. And I think something psychologically would happen if we started seeing folks really like, no, I care about my chinos. Like I like I think something good would happen.
I didn't think you were going to go to chinos there. Like maybe the knot of my tie, or
Yeah.
the make of my cufflinks. So okay, so that's interesting. What it makes me think of is Burning Man, and specifically where you and, let's call it, your cohort are seem to have turned away from that sort of willful, and I don't mean you specifically, but just like, let's call it the cohort, right? Younger people within the tech universe have turned away from that notion of like liminal uh hedonism, and maybe are getting like the rise of 996 as a culture in the American tech scene. We've read so much about this in the last couple of weeks, is a little bit of a reaction to the notion of like a kind of tech masters of the universe-ness, where you feel like I can get away with anything, I can wear anything, I can do anything I want, instead of being like, no, actually, we have a responsibility, we have a mission here. Is that true, or am I reading too much into that thing, do you think?
I definitely like it. I do think, I mean, I just got back from
I like it too, which is why I want that to be true. I would
I
like
want
there
it
to
to
be
be.
I would like
I
that to be
will
true.
will
Yeah.
this into truth. Um
Dream it, be it, baby.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I definitely think that it's weird. I think similar to a lot of broader cultures, like what I think things are having a hard time feeling distinctly contemporary today. because it's so easy to mine previous vibes to bring out
That's
something unique about yourself. And I think the same thing is true in tech. Like, I still know folks that are a little bit younger than me or the same age as I just turned 30 this summer. So like a little bit younger than me or around the same age of me that like went to their first Burning Man, you know? And
yeah,
so
for
like
sure.
clearly there's a desire to like tap into that. But at the same time, I think if you like really push those people to like um wear some button up uniform and do 996, they will equally do that. So it's like
Sure.
where previously I think a burner would never be caught dead doing that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, for sure.
their identity was too solid. And now I think like our identities are sort of like default porous and default flexible. And as a result of that, it's even hard to say something like, oh, do you think like this is happening broadly? It's just like, no, there's definitely burners that are 996ing out here. And like
Yeah, yeah,
and
sure.
they're gung ho about it. The same way that they're gung ho about Burning Man, which is funny.
Well, that's really intriguing. The idea of code switching in like constant code switching, default flexible. I like that a lot. The just as a way of kind of understanding people, and it reminds me. I had a conversation with James Harris from or maybe both James and Lawrence from Throwing Fits about a year ago,
Oh,
and I was talking about my son, or maybe this is 18 months ago. It was before my son went to college, and it was sort of like, he was like, what does your son dress like? And I was like, I don't know. He dresses kind of like I guess he kind of dresses like I did in 1993, like a sort of a skater.
yeah, Loki's in my closet, actually.
And yeah, well, I mean, that's actually true. But the thing that before I managed to answer, the other Throwing Fit partner, whomever was, I don't remember who was talking, was just like, does he wear everything all at once? Because all of the kids we see now are just wearing everything all at once.
That's funny.
And and I yeah, the idea of this kind of default flexible is interesting. It also gets back to the conversation we started with at the beginning, hipster dumb.
Yeah.
At that perfectly imperfect thing, there was a kid, I will never forget this guy. He was wearing like maybe every piece of clothing that he owned all at the same time, as well as a gigantic backpack with a gigantic carabiner on it. He was wearing cowboy boots with like long pointy toes. His hair was this huge and went in 9 different directions. And I'm just like, oh yeah, this is what wearing everything all at once means. But then again, like he can be at the rock show and signify something. He can be at the Lil Uzi Vert show and signify something. He can be at the fashion runway and signify something. He can be at the thrift store and signify something. Fuck,
Yeah. What does it mean when
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, what does it mean when contemporary culture is sort of just like a grab all? You know, like that's what's so funky to me.
Well, it means that it's all the more difficult to find the signal for the noise, and when you add that, you compound that fact with AI as a machine for more.
Yeah.
We're just stuffed.
Yeah, kind of perfect aesthetic for the AI era.
Right, exactly. It's like which of the data that I've been trained on am I going to pull forth in the response to this particular social circumstance
Yeah.
that I'm
Well,
in
okay,
now?
now I have a question for you.
Okay.
Basically, do you think it becomes harder or easier to be an opinionated person in a grab all culture?
I think easier is a dangerous like word to hinge that question on, because
Sure.
it it, it is inherent. It is. I think it's way easier to be opinionated. It's way less easy to be opinionated well. And by that, it just means to have an informed opinion, right? Like you just, you know, like
Yeah. That's funny.
it's a nightmare. But what you're gonna where we will inevitably get to, I think, is people who are able to sort of thread the needle between being broadly informed enough that they can get into specific conversations. And that's a lot of what this is, right? It's like broadly informed enough they can get into specific conversations and then be able to inform or be able to develop more expert opinions. I hope so. Jesus Christ. Because as Court says in the comments here, grab all might mean Tower of Babel. And, whether we're approaching that through a biblical sense or just in a metaphorical, like, disaster sense, we don't want to go there.
Yeah. It reminds me, I was having this conversation with one of my mentors, Freddie and Zuris, and he was talking about the problem with like asynchronous conversation is like you can fake knowing, right? Like, because you can very quickly like look something up and then like insert it 5 minutes later as if like, oh no, I was just like away from my phone. It's like, no, you weren't. You were
Yeah,
researching.
you were. Yeah, exactly. You were talking to Claude.
Yeah.
And
Whereas live conversation, you're forced to freestyle. So it's like very clear. It's like, do you know ball or don't you know ball? You know?
yeah. Well, all right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, Reggie. This has been really fun, as I knew it would be. We didn't get to any of your links at all, so we'll have to, maybe send me some notes about the ones that jumped out at you.
Yeah. There you go.
But thanks for making the time. People can find you at Product Lost, right?
Yeah.
Is and your handle on Substack is at Hip City Reg,
Yeah.
REG. Any other place
I'm the same thing everywhere. I'm
Okay,
City Reg on
so
Twitter and IG.
got it. And then any other stuff that people should be looking at? Would be trying to find Maria, or is that in sort of like low pro mode?
Listen, if you find it, I'd be impressed.
Okay.
That's all.
There you. All right, internet
if
searchers.
If you find it, you better become a client.
Right. Fair enough. All right, cool. Well, everybody, this has been Sick Talks number 103 with Reggie James. Reggie, thanks very much again for taking the time. And thanks everybody for tuning in, for commenting. This will be live on Substack later today with my newsletter, Sick Weekly. It'll be on Spotify and YouTube later today too. So if you want to revisit it, by all means. And in the meantime, thanks. Talk to you soon.
Peace, brother.
All right. Easy, Reggie. Talk to you soon.